Reddit is full of weird shit. From perverts to murderers, Reddit is definitely one of the strangest websites on the internet. As a caution, I hope the right age audience watches this video and is aware of the horror experience they are about to endure. Without further ado, here are some disturbing Reddit confessions. I never imagined I would be the person writing something like this, and I still hesitate even now, because there is no way to tell this story without admitting how deeply I failed someone who trusted me completely. Years ago, I hit a financial wall after a series of bad decisions and circumstances that left me with nowhere else to go, and my younger sister and her husband were the ones who opened their home to me without hesitation. They didn't ask questions, didn't make me feel small, and treated me like family should, which only makes what followed harder to live with. Living with them was supposed to be temporary, just until I got back on my feet, and at first, everything felt normal enough. My sister worked long hours, often late shifts, while her husband and I were home more often, sharing space in a way that slowly blurred boundaries I should have protected. One night, after drinking too much and letting emotions and familiarity override common sense, he crossed a line with me, and instead of stopping it, I let it happen, telling myself it was a mistake that would never repeat. It didn't stay a mistake. We kept having sex. What followed became a quiet, shameful routine that I convinced myself I could compartmentalize, something that only existed in the narrow window of time when my sister was at work and the house felt empty. Every week I told myself it would be the last time, and every week I chose the same selfish silence instead of doing the right thing. I lived under her roof, ate her food, listened to her talk about her marriage, and smiled at her while carrying something I knew would destroy her if it ever came out. When she found out, it wasn't through a dramatic confrontation or a confession from either of us, but through small pieces coming together in a way that made the truth unavoidable. She confronted me privately, and the pain in her voice was worse than anything she could have said in anger, because it was clear she was trying to understand how someone she loved could betray her so completely. I apologized, but apologies feel meaningless when they come after damage that can't be undone. After that, she changed in ways that were easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. She withdrew, stopped reaching out, stopped talking about the future, and carried herself like someone trying to survive something alone. I told myself she needed space, that time would help, and that involving myself further would only make things worse, which is something I regret more than I can explain. Then she took her own life. I know that no single event defines why someone makes that kind of choice, and I understand that grief and mental health are complex. But knowing that my actions were part of the pain she carried is something I will never escape. I live with the reality that I was given help when I needed it most and repaid it with betrayal, and that my silence afterward may have mattered more than I wanted to admit. I don't tell this story because I think I deserve forgiveness, and I don't expect anyone to sympathize with me, because I wouldn't if I were reading this either. I'm writing because pretending this didn't happen hasn't brought peace, and because carrying the truth alone has started to feel like its own kind of punishment. Some mistakes don't just ruin relationships, they rewrite lives, and this is one I will never be able to undo. I've never told anyone this, because once you say it out loud, it stops being something you can rationalize away, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Years ago, I witnessed the aftermath of a homicide. But the part that haunts me isn't just what I saw later. It's the fact that I crossed paths with the person who did it beforehand and chose to do nothing. I didn't know for sure in that moment what was about to happen, but I knew something was wrong, and I ignored it anyway. That night I had stopped at a small convenience store on my way home, the kind that stays open late and barely has anyone inside after a certain hour. As I was leaving, I bumped directly into a man coming in, hard enough that we both stumbled a bit and muttered quick apologies. When I looked at him, I remember noticing how tense he was, how his jaw was clenched and his hands were shaking like he was barely holding himself together. And there was something in his eyes that made my stomach drop in a way I couldn't explain. For a brief moment, I hesitated, standing there longer than necessary, because every instinct I had was telling me that this person was on the edge of something dangerous. He looked angry and panicked at the same time, like someone who had already made a decision and was trying not to think about it anymore. I considered asking if he was okay, or even just staying near the store a little longer. But I convinced myself I was being dramatic, and that it wasn't my responsibility to interfere in a stranger's life. He walked past me toward the darker side street that led away from the store, and I watched him go until he disappeared around the corner. I remember thinking that he looked like someone heading toward trouble, but instead of following that thought, I shook it off and headed home, telling myself that people are allowed to have bad days and that assuming the worst about someone could be unfair. A few minutes later, as I was walking down a quieter street, I heard raised voices ahead of me and slowed down instinctively. I recognized the man immediately when I saw him again, standing near a parked car with someone else, his body language aggressive and familiar in a way that made my heart start pounding. I stopped at a distance, half hidden behind a fence, telling myself I was just observing long enough to decide whether I should step in or call for help. Everything escalated faster than I was prepared for, and in a matter of seconds, the argument turned into something irreversible. One person fell to the ground, the other stood there frozen for a moment, and then the man I had bumped into earlier ran back to the car and drove away. I remember standing there in shock, realizing with sick clarity that I had seen this coming in some small way and still hadn't done anything to stop it. My phone was in my hand, and I knew exactly what I should do, but fear took over in ways I didn't expect. I was afraid of being seen, afraid of retaliation, afraid of becoming involved in something I couldn't escape from. And those fears outweighed the voice telling me that someone needed help right now. Instead of calling immediately, I turned around and walked away, convincing myself that someone closer would step in or that help was already on the way. The next day, I read about the homicide in the news, and every detail confirmed what I already knew, including the location, the timing, and the description of the suspect. I recognized him instantly, and the realization that I had been close enough to possibly change the outcome hit me harder than anything else. I understood then that while I didn't cause what happened, my inaction had become part of the story, whether I liked it or not. Years later, I still think about that moment outside the convenience store and how different everything might be if I had trusted my instincts instead of dismissing them. I don't know if stopping him was realistically possible, but I do know that I never even tried, and that knowledge stays with me in ways I can't explain to anyone who hasn't lived with the weight of a moment they chose to ignore. I've lived with this for over 30 years, and the part that still feels unreal is how normal my life looks to everyone else, because nothing about me suggests what I did or the choice I made afterward. Back then, I was young, careless, and convinced that consequences were things that happened to other people, not to me. And alcohol made that belief feel even more true. I'm not writing this because I expect forgiveness or understanding, because I know I don't deserve either, but because the silence has followed me for decades, and I'm tired of pretending it doesn't exist. That night I had been drinking, more than I should have, telling myself I was fine to drive because I didn't feel out of control, and because I had done it before without anything bad happening. I remember the road being familiar, almost comforting, and my thoughts drifting in that loose, unfocused way that comes with being drunk, but thinking you're still sharp. When the boy stepped into the road, I didn't react in time, and the impact was immediate and unmistakable, snapping me into a kind of clarity that came far too late. He couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, and that detail burned into my mind the second I saw him lying there in my headlights. I pulled over a short distance away and sat gripping the steering wheel, my heart racing, the smell of alcohol still on my breath as reality crashed down on me all at once. I knew instantly that calling for help would mean admitting I had been driving drunk, and that fear became the loudest voice in my head, drowning out everything else. Instead of getting out and doing the right thing, I stayed in the car, telling myself I needed a moment to think, even though deep down I already knew what I was going to do. I told myself that someone else would find him, that help would come faster without me there, and that ruining my own life wouldn't save his. Those excuses sound hollow now, but at the time they felt like lifelines, and I drove away. I don't remember much about the drive home except how badly my hands were shaking and how quiet everything felt once I was inside. I barely slept, convinced that police would show up at any moment, that someone had seen me, and that my life was about to end the way I knew it. When morning came and nothing happened, the relief I felt made me feel even worse. The news reported a hit and run involving a teenage boy later that day, and every detail confirmed what I already knew. They said there were no witnesses and no solid leads, and they asked anyone with information to come forward. I read the article again and again, fully aware that I was the information they needed, and I still stayed silent. Weeks turned into months, and months into years, and no one ever came knocking on my door. I cleaned my car obsessively, avoided that road whenever I could, and learned how to live with a constant weight in my chest that never fully went away. Eventually, it became clear that I was going to get away with it, legally at least. Life kept moving forward, because life doesn't stop just because you did something unforgivable, and I built a future on top of a night I never truly left behind. Every time I hear about drunk driving accidents or see a teenager walking alone at night, I'm right back there, sober enough to understand exactly what I did, and drunk enough that I chose myself anyway. Getting away with it didn't mean escaping it, because I've been living with that choice every day for more than 30 years, and I don't think there's any amount of time that can make it feel okay.